What happens if all African countries ban raw materials export to the Western countries and trade among themselves instead? What happens if the borders between African countries are removed and all Africans can travel freely throughout the continent? Any person wanting to sell or buy products can go to any geographical area. Not only that, but landlocked countries will get access to maritime routes. The continent would prosper and develop, and within no time, it would become the future of Europe. All this seemed like a Pan-African dream, with a few leaders actually talking about it. But now, the new president of Ghana, who received Ibrahim Traoré at his inauguration, has revealed his plan to end borders and ban raw material exports. But what does that really mean? How will it change Africa's fate, and what other leaders can stand with him to turn this idea into reality? In this video, let's know about it in detail. Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama has ignited a seismic shift in Africa's economic and geopolitical landscape by announcing two revolutionary policies: the elimination of colonial-era borders and the complete ban on raw material exports to the West. His message was clear: Africa can no longer afford to be a supplier of cheap resources while remaining economically dependent on foreign powers. Instead, the continent must industrialize, strengthen internal trade, and take full control of its wealth. His bold vision, however, was not just confined to Ghana. Mahama took this transformative agenda beyond Ghana's borders, hinting toward cooperation with other African countries to the next level. He said that for decades, African leaders have spoken about continental unity, but colonial-era borders have remained a major obstacle to true economic integration. These artificial divisions, imposed by European powers during the Berlin Conference of 1884, were designed to weaken Africa by keeping its nations fragmented and dependent on Western economies. These borders have restricted trade, increased conflicts, and stifled cooperation among African nations. Now, President Mahama's decision to eliminate these barriers signals a historic shift. At the African Prosperity Dialogue and the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, he strongly advocated for a borderless Africa where goods, services, and people can move freely without bureaucratic restrictions. He emphasized that the current setup only serves Western interests, keeping Africa divided, underdeveloped, and economically stagnant. At the core of Mahama's argument is the idea that Africa cannot achieve true sovereignty while its nations continue to see each other as competitors rather than partners in progress. He pointed out the glaring imbalance in global trade dynamics, where intra-African trade accounts for a mere 21% of the continent's total trade, while in Europe it stands at 70% and in Asia at 60%. This disparity highlights how Africa's fragmented economies have been structured to benefit Western nations at Africa's expense. If the continent is to dictate its own economic future, it must first break down these colonial-imposed divisions and establish itself as a single, unified market. By removing borders, Mahama envisions Africa as a formidable economic bloc that can compete on the global stage. The realization of this vision would accelerate the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, unlocking an estimated $3.4 trillion in market potential. A borderless Africa would enable seamless trade, allowing African businesses to grow without facing excessive tariffs, logistical challenges, or restrictive regulations. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. However, for this transformation to be fully realized, Africa must make significant investments in its infrastructure. Improved road networks, railways, digital connectivity, and energy supply systems will be crucial to facilitating cross-border trade. Mahama stressed that unless Africa prioritizes these investments, it will remain trapped in a cycle of underdevelopment and continued dependence on Western aid. Beyond eliminating borders, Mahama's plan to ban the export of raw materials represents an even more radical shift, one that has sent shockwaves through Western economic circles. For centuries, Africa's vast wealth has been systematically extracted and exported to foreign markets, generating massive profits for Western corporations while leaving African economies underdeveloped. Countries like Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Zambia possess some of the richest natural resources in the world, yet they continue to struggle with poverty, unemployment, and economic instability. The primary reason for this paradox is that Africa has remained a supplier of raw materials rather than a manufacturer of finished products. Mahama made it clear that this arrangement can no longer continue. Instead of exporting raw materials, African nations must develop their own processing industries to retain the value of their resources. This means that Ghana should not be sending cocoa beans to Europe, but instead should be producing its own globally competitive chocolate industry. According to Mahama, Nigeria must move beyond exporting crude oil and invest in refining capacity that meets its domestic and regional needs. Zambia should no longer be content with exporting raw copper, but must develop its own manufacturing sector to create finished goods. Niger should no longer provide its uranium at cheap prices to France. Congo should no longer allow the exploitation of its natural resources like cobalt. By shifting from a resource exporting model to an industrial economy, Africa will increase its share of global trade and prevent the continued economic exploitation of the continent. Interestingly, this call for self-reliance extends beyond Ghana. It is essential for the entire continent. Mahama urged other African leaders to adopt similar measures and work together to form a united economic front against Western exploitation. One of the key strategies he proposed was an Africa-wide boycott of Western businesses that continue to extract wealth from the continent without giving back. By denying the West access to African resources under exploitative conditions, Africa would force foreign governments and corporations to negotiate fairer trade deals, instead of dictating the terms as they have done for decades. Mahama's stance directly challenges U.S. economic dominance over Africa. Recent geopolitical developments, particularly Donald Trump's decision to freeze aid to Africa, have inadvertently sparked a wave of self-reflection among African leaders. Instead of viewing the aid cuts as a loss, Mahama and his counterparts see this as an opportunity to build a self-sufficient continent. By cutting dependence on foreign aid and focusing on resource-based industrialization, Africa can finally break free from the economic stranglehold imposed by Western powers. To realize this plan, Mahama visited Burkina Faso to discuss collaboration. His push to end colonial-era borders and ban raw material exports was at the heart of his discussions, reinforcing his belief that Africa must reclaim control over its trade, resources, and industries. Mahama's stance was clear. Africa can no longer afford to be a mere supplier of raw materials while the West continues to profit from the continent's wealth. Instead, African nations must collaborate, industrialize, and build an economic framework that prioritizes Africa first. The economic strategy discussed between Ghana and Burkina Faso emphasized regional cooperation. Mahama underscored the need for both nations to establish seamless trade routes, making it easier for goods to move freely across borders without unnecessary tariffs or bureaucratic hurdles. Trade between Ghana and Burkina Faso has always been vital, with Ghana serving as a key gateway for Burkinabe imports and exports. By strengthening these ties and investing in infrastructure such as roads, railways, and direct flights between Accra and Ouagadougou, both nations can significantly enhance their trade efficiency. Mahama also stressed the importance of boosting agricultural trade, ensuring food security, and creating sustainable business models that benefit both countries. However, the most important thing is Mahama's presence in Burkina Faso. Because Ibrahim Traoré has given a tangible example of African unity, making a confederation between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, Mahama's presence hints toward the expansion of this alliance. His visit to Burkina Faso immediately after Ibrahim Traoré visited Ghana, wearing a gun on his belt, reveals that both leaders have grand and ambitious plans. With the details of these plans not revealed yet, one thing is clear. The idea of removing African borders and banning raw materials is now being converted into a solid strategy African countries can adopt. What do you think? Can Ibrahim Traoré, Mahama and military leaders of Mali and Niger unite to showcase what the United States of Africa looks like. Do you feel a new wave of unity has begun in Africa that has never been seen before? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on how all African countries can end borders and keep raw materials to themselves, adding value and then selling them to Europe. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.